So we're moving on. It feels like a world tour here on some sort of for a band, but here we go. We had Turkey, we had Finland, we started off with China. What better way to wrap it up than the effect of M&A on the global games industry? And we have a great panel. I'll introduce a few of them because I did my homework a little bit here and I thought, wow, this is really cool. So of course, Shum Singh, he's going to be our moderator. He's managing director and founder at Agnito Capital, games-focused investment bank, and it's on a mission to close deals that make studios happy. Talking about happiness again here, not just leading up to the deal, but in the years afterwards. And we're happy to listen to you, Shum. But I want to also give a little bit of insight into your panel. Cordel Robbin-Coker, Carrie first, talking about taking games to Africa, the promise of blockchain, and Lexi, a data diva, I have to say, at App Annie. Looking forward to those insights. Simon Prytherch, I will not ruin that name, I'll just say Simon. Ideally placed to answer these questions as you're also growing a new development studio and creating original IP at a European publisher. And finally, Nikita Matsokin, executive producer, MY.GAMES. Lovely to have you share your perspective, as you said, on consolidation of the market and recent notable M&A activities and trends. I'll leave it to you, Shum.
Great. Well, thank you, Peggy Ann. Appreciate that. So yeah, I think everybody is pretty much aware at just a rampant amount of consolidation that the industry has experienced the past few years. 2020 was an absolute blockbuster year that we all recall very well. But I think also thus far, 2021 has even already eclipsed 2020, which I kind of shake my head and think, how is that possible? So we're in this kind of real incredible sort of environment for consolidation, and I think one of the main themes here that we wanted to discuss, along with a number of other subjects, is all of this consolidation really beneficial to the industry as a whole? Obviously there's been a lot of compelling reasons to consolidate, given just how fragmented the industry is in terms of different platforms, in terms of different genres, etc. So there is a very strong impetus to conduct M&A, but what we also, I think, wanted to talk about is, are there some potential drawbacks? So with that sort of question in mind, I'll open up to the panelists, and maybe we'll start with Cordel. So please, the floor is yours.
So we're starting with introductions.
I thought Peggy Ann made a little quick introduction, but please, Cordel. Sorry, I don't want to steal any thunder. Please.
No. Just very quickly. I'm CEO of Carry First. We're a regionally focused publisher focused on bringing international content to Africa. And before that, I spent about a decade in M&A and private equity. Look, I think this is a really fascinating topic. There's so much momentum, which has now been sustained over almost 24 months. And even before then, you saw some interesting trends. And so I think it's neither good nor bad. And there are a lot of nuances, which I'm excited to dive into with the rest of the panel here. Great,
thank you. Nikita, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Shum. Hey, everyone. Great to be here with you guys. My name is Nikita. I'm part of MY.GAMES Venture Capital. And MY.GAMES Venture Capital is a strategic investment arm of MY.GAMES, which is one of the leading European publishers by revenue. What we're doing here at MY.GAMES Venture Capital is that we invest in small independent development studios, help them grow, and then consider its acquisition at a later stage. So yeah, overall, we're focused on seed rounds, mostly checks 500K to 2 mils, and yeah, being really active out there on the investment side of things. And yeah, happy to discuss this really exciting topic together with you.
Thank you. Simon, over to you.
Hey there. I've run my own successful development studios over the years and exited from those, but currently I'm working with Gamigo, a European publisher who has a strong M&A strategy and developing their internal titles for mobile. So I have a broad spectrum. One of the things with your question about, what's the drawbacks? I think if you're looking at M&A deals from a developer perspective, you do need to consider whether you're going to lose that agility that made you successful. You will have to answer to your larger companies, usually public companies, shareholders, and that means you may need to lower your risks. But on the flip side, you'll have the funds to invest in new projects, so it has to be weighed whether it's the right time for you.
Great, thank you. And over to you, Lexi.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lexi Sydow. I lead the insights team at App Annie. We are a mobile market data and insights provider, and spent a lot of time analyzing the mobile gaming market specifically over the last 2 years or so, which has been particularly fun given the acceleration from COVID. I mean, you can really see the rapid ramp up in Q2 of 2020, and then largely seeing that it's been sustained over time, varying metrics that will show, but ultimately the consumer spend one is pretty compelling to show how gaming sort of became more mainstream in a way during COVID and has pretty much sustained a lot of that growth. In terms of the question about consolidation in the space, I think similar to what Simon said, one of the major things to consider for us is looking at some of the smaller publishers, how they can sort of still stay afloat and stay competitive. And part of that is the being nimble and being able to test different gameplays a lot faster. But at the same time, as mobile, I mean, one of the major trends we've seen is just the big budget capacity that has tended to follow, especially during and after COVID. I think that when things go mainstream in that kind of a sense, you tend to see a bit more appetite and interest in the space because it's also the amount of people playing the games has grown, and we've seen that sort of the cross-platform nature is really compelling, and that can open up some of these bigger budgets, especially some attention from traditional players that might be looking more at PC, Mac, and console. And so I think that that's where the question lies, is how much of that potential big budget production can, in some ways, bring really interesting new genre-defining titles to mobile, but then at the same time, how do the smaller pops sort of stand out within that?
Yeah, to the question, completely agree that well, pandemic has been one of the reasons that resulted in big capital flowing into the gaming industry, and looks like the more of a general public starts to understand that especially free-to-play business model is really sustainable, especially at the mid to big scale of the products and the publisher's portfolio with long monetized cohorts. And therefore, yeah, well, I believe that this M&A wave is a part of this huge amounts of capital flowing into the gaming industry. And of course, it has some like benefits and the drawbacks. In terms of benefits, of course, well, the industry has been really fragmented at the very beginning, and consolidation is, I believe, obvious part of evolution, right? As big companies are into controlling the full pipeline of creation of content, as well as bringing new audience to the games. And yeah, well, the competition is rising. However, this big capital influx results in better opportunities to raise investment for new studios, which is definitely an opportunity.
Great. Well, yeah. Thanks for all those comments. I think what I'm what we're kind of hearing is there's a tremendous appetite and interest level in the games industry for various reasons, and I think a lot of both private company investors, public institutional investors have literally woken up. They had this sort of eureka moment during COVID because the World Health Organization said stay home and play games. So they all realized, oh crap, why don't I have exposure to this industry? So I think the floodgates have opened. You know, and we're talking about all this capital inflow, and you know, what I think particularly in everybody's mind at the moment is sort of blockchain gaming with kind of intersection with crypto and tokenizing games, but then also you kind of have the metaverse. And I think in the last probably couple of quarters, we've seen more than you know, easily over $1 billion being invested into some of these companies, and incredibly large fundraisings. You know, funding rounds. We're seeing, you know, sort of Animoca raising 65 million at over a couple of billion valuation, Sky Mavis raising 150 million, Mythical raising a really big round. Forte just announced last week a round at 750 million plus. Related to the first comment, and you know, kind of talking about, hey, is this consolidation going to contribute to fewer larger acquirers? Do you see potentially some of these new blockchain entrants becoming dominant players, or becoming sort of or potentially usurping some of the incumbents right now? So let's go back to Cordel.
I think the trend is incredibly powerful. The interesting thing is that there are very few like genuine examples of blockchain games that have scaled to date. I think Axie has really just kind of captivated and captured everyone's imagination. And then beyond that, for the most part, it's like largely theoretical. I do think that the promise of play to earn is massive. I don't know if we're at the juncture when free to play came out and we were saying, well, you know, what about premium games? I don't know if we're going to have that kind of a sea change. But I do think that play to earn and sort of blockchain oriented games are going to have a significant impact on the industry, and really kind of change the way people view games, people view ownership of assets, and so on. And so, I mean, we're seeing primarily the sort of private venture capital market, broadly defined, investing in that right now. And I could see some of these becoming really, really big companies. You know, in some ways they're built to avoid acquisition because over time, you know, they're supposed to essentially become decentralized with regard to ownership and decision making, which actually kind of flies in the face of, you know, build a nice game as a studio and then hope that like Zynga comes by and puts down an offer, right? Like over time, these are supposed to be owned by the people. I'm very curious to see whether that happens or whether traditional centralized capitalism continues its reign.
Great. How about over to you, Nikita?
Well, yeah, these days we're looking at the very exciting trend with this blockchain games, and I believe that NFT and this massive idea of players owning the assets beyond the products themselves is really important and will definitely make a difference. Well, my personal view on play to earn is more questionable, I would say, in terms of outreach globally, especially in the Western regions. So yeah, my view on this is that Axie Infinity has really showed solid performance, and the recent round is basically proven that. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what would be the next gen of NFT-based games beyond play to earn, and how this idea of players owning the assets through NFT will evolve in creating the new value, new engagement within products in the coming years. So yeah, it's more of thinking out loud than providing direct answers. But yeah, in our view, that's a little bit too early to decide and to judge for long term for NFT and blockchain, especially in this new generation of play to earn products.
Mm-hmm. And Simon, did you want to add some comments to that?
Yeah, in my research for this panel, I was looking at what deals have been done this year. And for private equity, there was roughly 9 billion new deals. Out of those, $1.8 billion was for NFT and blockchain. So that's 20% of new deals this year, which is a real sharp rise. And it shows that that's the new trend. And the specific deals like So Rare, which is a fantasy soccer game. There's Dapper Labs, which is trying to establish, well, they've been establishing a new blockchain called Flow, which is, so they're trying to establish a standard. And then there's also people like Mythical Games who are developing an open standard for virtual items on the blockchain as well. So a lot of these early investments are trying to make big plays to be the standard to go forward. And I think that's what you're going to see. And then outside of blockchain, there's obviously Facebook's renaming itself. That's a big indication of where they're going to put their money in the coming years. And I think that, yeah, that's obviously exciting the markets because they know how much cash that will bring.
Yeah, sure. Lexi, did you want to add any comments, or you kind of agree with what the folks have just mentioned?
Yeah. I mean, I do agree with, especially the sense that it might be, it's still rather nascent, I think, for us to see some of that meaningful traction on mobile. But I will say one of the things that really strikes me, and which I think looking at other categories outside of gaming, you start to see these trends emerge, which is a testament to some of the mechanics, is just the idea around creation, where you're empowering users to create in some capacity and to foster that deeper engagement. So, and then even the step further on like monetizing that, you start to see that on TikTok, for instance, where, TikTok has very quickly become one of the top grossing apps on the app stores. And it's due to sort of that similar to Twitch. If you have a live streamer, people are sort of buying those in-app purchases to compensate the content creators. So it's that creator economy in effect. So I think that trend in itself is extremely powerful, and we're seeing it grow really fast on mobile overall. And so I think anytime that you're combining these social elements with gaming in particular, that entertainment space, and then empowering creation from the users, there's a really nice sweet spot that we're seeing occur, especially in terms of engagement and the potential for monetization.
Yeah, actually, on the other note, in terms of blockchain NFT games, I believe one of the conceptual, challenges is distribution, right? Because Google Play and App Store are not allowing for blockchain NFT games. So yeah, it's all about wide audience appeal and how those really well-funded products with innovative monetization systems as well as economies will get to the audience worldwide. And will they really disrupt the current state of platforms like Google and Apple, or vice versa, and the platforms will push back on this? So yeah, really interesting topic to observe in the coming months and years.
Yeah, and I'd throw Steam into that mix as well.
Oh yeah.
So let's move on to the next question. Are there any specific areas of consolidation, let's say, particular platforms, or let's say specific niche genres of games, whether it's casual, mid-core, hardcore, that you're seeing, perhaps that haven't maybe received the same amount of attention as the strategy genre in mobile or PC, as an example, or for instance, battle royale or MOBA type games. What are there any sort of let's say hidden interesting areas that for some reason acquirers are overlooking? Back to you, Cordel.
I mean, anecdotally, it looks like almost no space is safe. I see consolidation in mobile and PC, probably less so console because of the nature of it, across a range of genres. I think the one probably where I haven't seen anything significant is in the big budget shooter genre, and maybe I'm missing one, but I think that because of the incredible cost to develop those games, you actually see that the original owners are large platforms to start with. And so they're, spending tens and hundreds of millions of dollars and then going head to head. But otherwise, there's nothing that really stands out that says like, look, that's a real opportunity ripe for consolidation where there hasn't been at this stage.
Great. Nikita?
Yeah, well, in my view, big folks and big publishers and corporations are executing on their own strategies in terms of building out their diversified portfolios across genres and platforms. So yeah, like we can see various approaches to, let's say, genres of highest interest from several publishers. Or if we'll take, let's say, Embracer as an example, then they're, in my view, they're building out several verticals, like PC premium vertical, like hyper casual vertical with recent Crazy Labs acquisition, and also like classic free-to-play mobile game as a service vertical, which is led by Deca Games. So yeah, in my view, the M&A wave is covering all the genres, and yeah, it pretty much depends on a specific publisher and their appetite to increase their outreach of the audience in some specific genres, or establish really solid cross promotion of the audience within their portfolios, especially with the recent IDFA changes and yeah, that same trend that is coming from Google Play these days.
So Simon, being very active in the market, looking as you mentioned from media and game perspective, since you're sort of trolling through and trying to find these sort of gems of studios out there, what are you seeing? Is there anything that's just glaringly obvious that for some reason folks have ignored?
I think as outside of the actual game genres, one of the key investment areas is tools. You see this with keyword studios and the way they've grown. Almost parallel to Embracer, which is game studios. Keyword Studios is providing the services to games developers. And you also see it in the combining of performance marketing and ad tech as well, with mobile development and publishing, so that you can capitalize on both and take advantage of the margins in both businesses. Look at AppLovin and Max and Adjust and Iron Source and their Supersonic Studios. I think if you're looking at sort of games areas, I don't think there's any niche area currently that doesn't have large investment and M&A activity. It's all getting attention at the moment, but the areas where you can keep audiences for years is what's going to. So even though there's a lot of activity in the hyper casual area, like you saw with Crazy Labs and Bracer, that's almost like they're using that to get an audience in, and then to keep them longer, they're hopefully going to shift that onto games and services that have a longer life.
And Lexi, did you want to add something, particularly from a mobile perspective?
Yeah, I think to Simon's last point, just looking at some of the top charts, I will say what's compelling to see is for downloads, for instance, we tend to see that it's very hyper casual heavy. You know, a lot of people playing hyper casual games by their nature, you cast a wider net. But what's really interesting is that over the last year, in recent quarters, we've seen some of the more core or mid-core games start to show up a bit more in those top downloads charts. So My Talking Angela, we see Roblox, we see some of these other kind of games that you expect to see show up maybe for really engaged users or consumer spend, and they're showing up in the downloads chart, which I think is really another thing that kind of paints the picture of mobile's potential and where it's going, is how the mobile gamer themselves might also be slightly maturing, where some people are always going to love hyper casual games, but I think that that's that dipping your toe in. And as the market's moving, I think that people, they might start there, and then they're sort of growing into some of the other games that might take them a little bit more core. And to Simon's point about those games that keep you coming back, the really sticky games where you're typically, a lot of the ones that really have that strong engagement are competitive multiplayer. There's that social component of some kind that keeps you coming back. So that, I do think that's a really positive thing, because it shows that really broad reach that we're starting to see across multiple types of titles. It's not quite as niche almost. So that's something I think in the coming months we'll see more of as well. And I think it speaks to kind of the trends that Simon was talking about.
Yeah, to Simon's point, I believe it's a very important call out about the fact that big folks and publishers are starting to pay attention not only on the product companies, but also on the services companies. So if we'll take Embracer, for example, they've acquired Saber, which is about content production, as far as I remember, last year. And just recently they've acquired Bytex, and Bytex is mostly known for its QA powerhouse. So basically, big folks are building out their, I would say, full house portfolio of services, products, and ed tech companies to really be present in all the verticals of game industry and consolidated in full.
Yeah, I do agree with some of your comments, and I think certainly Embracer, having sold Deca and a number of studios to them over the years, I know the company extremely well. I do always think that they are kind of forward thinking and really progressive, and have a very holistic view. Personally, I'm just not sure whether other folks will catch on. I think that the you know, and conceptually, in what we're speaking here and hypothetically, I think everything makes sense, but in practice, and having brought them various types of opportunities, you'd imagine they would be compelled for all the same reasons, but they're not biting. So remains to be seen. I'd like to be proven wrong.
In the end, with Embracer thing, pardon, just a few secs, it's all about execution, right? So of course you can add a great portfolio of the companies and have a full house of services, products, etc. But will you actually get to the synergy between them to the higher level compared to diversified range of companies which are working independently? And if yes, at scale, then it of course makes a lot of sense from the business standpoint.
If we're talking about M&A, then obviously Unity is the big one in the tools market, where they've bought so many companies over and quite so many companies over the last few years, and obviously Keyword Studios I mentioned earlier, but with the Unity, with looking at the other trends like NFT, metaverse, they're the company that are going to be behind a lot of this growth as well. So they're putting banking on the growth of these sectors themselves, and buying into the tools and the DevOps, etc., that will allow us to create the games for those platforms.
Yeah, and maybe just an additional point on this, because I think the tools piece is super interesting. The combination of content and tools as a potential moat over time, I think is really interesting. You look at what AppLovin has done, starting from tools, adding content, and then now making a couple big acquisitions with MoPub. That is the most recent one, and then even Zynga getting in the action. Who's a pure play content company for a long time. It remains to be seen how that plays out, but to the point of other independent players and smaller players, what it means for them, if you have a few parties actually literally sort of acquiring the tools that you use in order to build and go to market, it makes it pretty hard to think about being independent for a very long time. So I think that has pretty significant implications for potentially future consolidation.
Yeah, and exactly on that point, Cordel, you read my mind, because the next question was with respect to smaller independent players. Does it even make sense for them to kind of go it alone, or should they really strongly consider joining a larger group and being part of this consolidation wave? And again, I've spoken to many studios who are staunchly proud of being independent and remaining independent and will always be independent. And then suddenly I'll read about them getting sold 2 weeks later, and I'll pick up the phone and say, "What happened?" So it's just interesting to see that even some really ardent believers in being fiercely independent, have succumbed. What is changing the opinion of some of these smaller independent players who still, let's be honest, they have some really good businesses, still quite profitable, have steady businesses, but why join this current wave of consolidation? And Lexi, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that one of the major trends is just the big production value going into some of, especially from the mobile standpoint. I mean, you look at games like Genshin Impact, which were pretty much genre-defining games, and just the production value that went into that cross-platform. And so I think that's a rather compelling card. There are some concerns, we read about in the market or other analysts speaking about just a potential financial crisis looming. I know there's a lot of market, questioning. And so there could be this sense as well of people or specifically smaller studios maybe trying to kind of cash out a bit now if they're feeling, if for them, what they're projecting is that there might be some sort of funds drying up in the future as well. But I'm very interested to hear everyone else's take on this one. It's a compelling question.
Sure. Simon, how about yourself? And any comments to add on that?
As I mentioned earlier, I work with Gamigo, we actively have an M&A policy. I'm part of the due diligence team for mobile studios, and how we pitch to studios is that the scale, the fact that we've got advanced data analytics, the performance marketing and ad tech in the other half of the business, and then obviously a large marketing department and marketing expertise that you may not want to devote your development time to. So these are all good reasons to be acquired, especially if you don't want to get involved in all of that as a developer. But it's not, it's timing. I think a lot of developers, I'm talking now from my background as a developer, they rush into trying to sell the company too early sometimes. What they should look at is their own timeline and not be pressured by what the market's doing. See when it would be best for them to go out to the market, when they think it would be the peak value of their company or the best time to get help, rather than be forced into it by, as Lexi was saying, the thought of it, the market's crashing. That quite often doesn't happen, or if it does, then you shouldn't be worried about it if your company's on the ascendancy.
Great. And over to you, Nikita.
Yeah. Well, in our view, marketing, user acquisition, being very expertise and resource and financial heavy on the mobile free-to-play side of things, especially, is one of the key aspects that is pushing mid, small-sized independent developers on mobile to really join the wave of consolidation. However, well, given our observations of the market, the product is always the king. So there is always an opportunity to create a solid product with really exciting gameplay, which will make a difference compared to, let's say, competition in the genre, and attract large volumes of audience and be successful throughout various ways from user acquisition to organic traffic to working with influencers, etc. But to Lexi's point, which I agree with, fear of missing opportunity, right, is one of the aspects that really contribute to this M&A wave and desire of independent development studios to join this big corps. Because hey, multipliers are really high, valuations are high, so why not joining this wave and create something together with a big corp.
Great. Cordel, you already kind of answered this question.
I did. So one reason why you would is because you feel like it's going to be really hard to go at it alone. But I think the other panelists in much more sort of subtle terms really hit the nail on the head. And I think the biggest driver is cash, because if you're looking for UA help or different capabilities and things like that, there are service providers and there are full stack publishers that provide that and allow you to continue to be independent. And there are private capital markets and venture and otherwise that allow you to continue to fund your business, to fund growth, and so on, and also remain independent. So the reason why, to me, the biggest reason why you sell, give up some level of control of your own destiny is for cash in your bank account. And it's really the question of cash today versus the promise of what we can build in the future. So I think that's the biggest driver. But all hope is not lost. I think the gaming industry is the rare one where small independents matter and will matter. Because if it was really easy to repeat that magic of making a great game, the big companies would just pour cash on it and multiply it over and over and over. They wouldn't be going to random corners of the world to acquire 10-person and 25-person studios, because there still is art in making a great game, and there's also a bit of luck. So there will always, I believe, be a role for indie and emerging game studios.
Great. Just moving on to the next question, and I think we're going to probably run out of time after that one, and then I do want to open up and answer some questions that we received in the chat.
Indeed you do, Sir Shum. I'm going to read a few to you in a moment.
There you go. There you go. So we'll make it really quick on this next question. So So we are seeing now some attention from media and streaming players coming into kind of games and that sort of intersection between streaming audiences and Lexi referred to kind of content creation and TikTok and how that's just had a tremendous impact on mobile. How do you guys envision traditional media players and not necessarily just them, but also companies like Netflix now that have really made a real foray into games? And do you think that some of them could potentially become larger dominant acquirers in the future? So over to Nikita first this time.
Yeah, that's a great question. In my view, as IPs are becoming more and more important in the entertainment overall, and lots of mid to big size development studios are getting those IPs licensed for their products. I believe that synergy is becoming more and more important and meaningful. Especially given the push and up price of cost per install in mobile free to play. So yeah, I believe this is one of the reasons that will be bringing larger entertainment companies and corporations closer to game development studios, including all kind of strategic partnerships and M&As, of course, because hey, gaming will be is actually already a next big thing in terms of entertainment, right? Really rapidly growing industry. So yeah, from the rational and business standpoint, lots of entertainment companies should be on this train already.
Great. And then over to Lexi. Do you have any thoughts to share on this subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, I probably spoke a little bit before to it, so I'll keep it brief for time's sake, but I think there's a huge intersection between social entertainment and games and sort of the kind of core ethos behind it and what they do for consumers and what consumers get from them. So I'm not surprised to see companies like Netflix kind of jumping on this bandwagon. I think it makes a ton of sense. And I think I'm actually excited to see where things go from here and how they take it and what IPs they leverage. And I mean, we're seeing some indications even of, mobile influencing the content that's streaming, right? With Arcane showing on Netflix. Just read that it was the highest rated show, I believe is what they've said. So this is a really interesting, it's not just, I think, sort of entertainment scooping in, it's also how games are sort of reshaping some of the landscape for entertainment too. So at the end of the day, I think those social features are incredibly important, and we see that across the board through many apps and in games especially. And I think this intersection is the space that I would be watching specifically next year and in the years to come.
Great. And how about Simon? Anything to add?
I think with Netflix coming into the games industry, it's also showing that the subscription model with Google Play Pass, their own game service, and Apple Arcade is a viable business route for all the developers, and therefore it's showing a maturing industry that to investors that look, there is lots of different streams. It's not just all free to play. There are some other ways you can monetize your games as well.
Great. And any final thoughts to add on that, Cordel?
I think over time, almost all traditional IP will have some kind of gaming corollary, because I think what we've learned over the last few years is that games, and particularly the free-to-play model, is like the best way to monetize content, period. I think of Netflix as a platform, so almost much more like a publisher and a consolidator. But your pure play IP creators, I think, are going to stay on the licensing side and allow game companies to leverage their IP and basically collect royalty checks, which is, I think, a good commercial partnership and will be good for consumers over time.
Great. Then I think it's time that we can get into some of the questions. So we have here the first one.
Okay.
Oh,
No, go for
sorry.
it.
No, please, Peggy, you go for it.
No, go for it. I mean, I thought one that I thought was very interesting because Cordel, you raised it, is people are a little bit upset that you're hesitant about blockchain. They're like, it's interesting to see the hesitancy on blockchain NFT, clearly not matching the wider market. What would convince you? What would be a sense that we have a breakthrough? I think that's a great question because we don't have that feeling yet, but and you were one of the less enthusiastic so far. You say it's coming, but when do we know it's here?
I actually saw that question and found it quite fascinating because I consider myself actually one of the converted, particularly in my set of geographies, which is really Africa. I think blockchain gaming and the play to earn model have like tremendous scope, right? Like my median gamer or user is a 19-year-old young man. He has typically more time, energy, and intelligence and money. And so the idea that he or she could play a game, make money, trade assets, and stay above sort of the fray and leapfrog a lot of traditional ways of earning and engaging, I think is really, really compelling. But, we actually haven't seen that many sort of commercially viable models come to market yet. And so a lot of the capital that's going in is funding projects that are in development. That's just, that's an observable fact. And doesn't mean that, I'm not a Web3 believer, because I definitely am.
Okay, so you're a diehard. Open it to anyone else? Otherwise, I'll move on. You tell me. Are we good to move on? Because one thing that they bring up also in the questions is, we're seeing, I'll stay with blockchain for a moment. We're seeing blockchain, the metaverse, it's happening sort of outside of what we can track, what we can really monitor. Lexi, you're over at App Annie. What is your perspective on that? Because it's mobile focused, but we also can't monitor it the way we can other apps, other developments.
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting one. I think we sort of looked at the metaverse space within some of these sort of our subgenre taxonomy that we have. And we actually were forecasting some of the spend for next year, which was for what we're looking at would be around $3.1 billion in metaverse apps. That's from the consumer spend standpoint through in-app purchases. But beyond that, I think it is an interesting area because your biggest players right now on mobile are Roblox, number one, and then Minecraft. And there are some other games and apps that sit outside. In South Korea, there's some, Zepeto is another big one. But some of these don't even sit in the games genre. They're under apps categorization from an app store standpoint. So it is an interesting area because you start kind of venturing into avatar as well. And it's going to be really fascinating. I think we're just sort of now getting sort of our grips and analyzing it and figuring out how we start to look forward in the future. But I think we are very much early days with that.
How does that make you feel, Shum? Because there's another question here, are you interested in looking into that for an acquisition? Of course, a little bit of it's metaverse. It's a different universe. It's a different equation for you, probably.
I think the reality is whether it's blockchain, whether it's metaverse, you're talking about industries. I think we sort of alluded to it a little bit in the discussion earlier. These are really still emerging, kind of areas. So yes, you've had some early success in, Axie Infinity, Top Shot, etc., Sandbox, but realistically, these are still pretty niche games. If you look at the total addressable audience of people who've actually purchased an NFT, it's less than 2 million people worldwide. That to me is not a mass market audience, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about how many companies have raised money, even from a metaverse perspective, there is a lot of promise, but it's still really, really nascent. So I think until you have real compelling games out there that are showing a significant amount of traction, growth, etc., and stable and somewhat predictable revenues, are you going to see larger publishers, really say, okay, you know what, this is an industry, we have to buy into it. They can afford to sit on the sidelines, as they have with every other new sort of area that's come along the way, whether it was VR previously, whether it was, way back when the App Store started, different genres of games that received funding. So they can be patient and wait to see which actual players will potentially become the leading ones or dominant ones with respect to, let's say, blockchain or metaverse, and then simply try to see if they can acquire them.
Simon,
Biggest
I'd love to
problem.
I was
the
gonna say, I'd love to
biggest-
hear your perspective, Simon, because it could also be that you simply incubate them.
The biggest problem is that you've got Apple and Steam coming out and saying you can't have NFTs in your games if you're on our platform. Google have taken a different approach. They're doing an inked a deal, I think, with Dapper Labs. So I think they're looking to embrace NFTs. So in the long term, so I think that's not being on Apple App Store or on the Steam store is going to block NFT games for a bit and cause some problems. So until there's a way of getting to market that doesn't rely on those, then it's going to it's not that there isn't an immediate way of doing it unless you're going to do it through unless you've got a platform like Roblox, which is its own platform.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
Epic has said they'll embrace it.
Yeah. So yeah, you've got an alternative to, but then if you look at the different, what's the market share of Epic versus Steam? It's
Small.
Yeah.
Small.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I actually, even if the traditional gaming companies don't acquire these companies, I actually think your first acquirers are going to be big tech, right? I think Google, Facebook, Microsoft, in particular, are going to be the first players that snap up the sort of metaverse and play to earn or blockchain gaming companies, because one, they have the cash to, they can take a really long-term view instead of having to build out, entire ecosystems and new technologies. They can snap it up. And that's really what they've done historically, right? You buy Android, you buy the people who are building apps, you buy Instagram, you buy WhatsApp, and then you leverage it to build out your own platform, and you try and get ahead of the trends. So I do think there's going to be consolidation in the space. I just think it's going to be big tech.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna be great to have you back maybe in a year to see if you were all right. Some very, very interesting
Might all be wrong.
predictions. I'll leave it to you to wrap. Shum, maybe you want to have a last round. I mean, we've gone over time because people just wanted to hear about this topic, so we're not worried about that. Otherwise, thank your panelists for an awesome and very interesting and invigorating conversation. A lot of open questions. That one about distribution will have us thinking.
Yeah, I would just summarize very quickly. I took a couple of notes here.
Mhm.
It's a great time to be in the industry. I think both private and public capital has just poured in, particularly during COVID, which has just really just kind of created a kind of this perfect storm of having smaller players getting funded, to larger players raising more equity, to more and more companies going public, and all of them have contributed to this just incredible consolidation wave that continues to just get bigger and bigger. Blockchain, it's still early days, but there's clearly a tremendous amount of excitement. I think that Simon brought up a great point. 20% of all funding in the industry has gone towards blockchain. I think that number is only going to get bigger at the current pace. So it's going to be incredible to see what happens. I would like to see more, hopefully. Small companies, smaller developers, there's this real sort of, I think, sentiment that, this fear of missing out on this current consolidation wave has also contributed to more M&A occurring. And then finally, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how streaming players, particularly folks like Netflix, continue to just try to establish themselves in the industry, whether that's even acquiring more studios onto their platform and to some degree kind of trying to make their sort of platform more dominant, or at least an alternative to what the current platforms are, whether it's mobile, PC, or console. It'll be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Excellent, excellent. So it's been a great conversation. I guess thanking all of your guests, your panelists, and bringing this to an interesting close to keep people coming back, because of course we've got more coming this afternoon with more great talks. So thanks again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.